Okay, let's pick up where we were regarding the Tzitz Eliezer. The most important running point that we had was the Rambam's general rule, right? We had the machlokes. The temple sanctity, is it eternal or is it dependent on the temple actually standing? Okay, I wanted to indicate what page I'm on here, at the bottom of page 2. So we said that the strict opinion says, according to the Rambam, the temple sanctity still exists today, and therefore it is strictly forbidden to enter the temple precinct in a state of impurity. But that's actually kind of nuanced. It's not one thing, stay off of Har-Bayis. The actual halacha is there's different layers. There's different boundaries within the temple, and the Rambam's saying the innermost area, the inner courtyard of the temple, which has always existed because they added courtyards to the temple over the course of history. There's one essential courtyard of the temple. That's the one immediately surrounding the temple edifice and the altar. And that's where people who have any form of impurity should not be going into. So the Rambam was saying, without reason. Yes, we said that even a Tmei Mace is allowed there. He's allowed there. Tmei Mace is allowed on the Temple Mount 100%, the outer parts of the Temple Mount up to the Azara. And even within the Azara, if he is in the majority. And that's not just a law for Passover. That's a law for Yom Kippur. That's a law for all weekdays. If the majority of the people who show up that day to the service and basically are waiting on the Temple Mount, waiting to enter the temple at dawn for the Kohanim to let them in.
It has to be built first to begin with.
Well, I'm just saying that the borders exist.
The altar itself.
Okay, yeah, you have to do that. My point was...
Those would be the initial reasons.
Yeah, okay. Those to build it. Yes. Really, we should have everybody getting sprinkled with the ashes of the red cow immediately in order to begin the construction of the temple. But if we don't have that, we would even build the temple in impurity. Yeah? That's a big surprise. Don't forget, wait a minute, they're building the Holy of Holies. When they're building the Holy of Holies, how did the workmen stand in the place that was supposed to be the Holy of Holies? How did they put down the floorboards? Well, actually, they put down precious stone. Solomon's temple, the part that wasn't Even HaShasiyah, the exposed foundation stone, so that was made out of gold. The floor was actually overlaid with gold. Eventually, the Gentiles pillaged it. So in the second temple, it was marble, the fine marble. By the way, they're putting down, when they were building the temple, how did they stand in the holy areas? The answer, in order to build the temple, you have to stand in this holy area. It's like when they used to construct the...
Slide it to the side.
Side.
Yeah. Scroll back up.
Back up. Okay.
And then it comes up again, slide it to the side.
Side to which side, right or left?
Either way.
Okay, either way. Fine. Yeah, so they were building the temple. Of course they have to stand in holy places, You can't construct a temple without standing where you shouldn't. What makes it holy is once they set up the curtain and then say, okay, now we're starting the service, now we can't have people come in here. We also saw earlier, workmen had to enter the Holy of Holies. Okay? They didn't just walk in carte blanche, right? They just get to... Yeah, there was a reverential way of entering it. So this is the thing that we've said. Until this point, the Tzitz Eliezer has just affirmed at least michumra, that is, just to play it safe at least, if it's not actually the halacha, that because the temple still has sanctity, you can't just go wherever you want on the Temple Mount. And people were confused about that, so they just said blanket. But we haven't seen until this point a halachic argument to keep people off of the Temple Mount without entering the Azara. That we haven't seen. So he continues over here on page 3. The rules, the words of the Rambam are still upheld. Shari of Akayim is what they say regarding marriage contract. Suba. It's a poetic term. And therefore, a person who enters the place of the mikdash, we said this is an ambiguous term, he is liable to excision because we are all contaminated by contact with the dead. Of course, that rule, according to the Rambam, only applies by entering the temple courtyard, the inner courtyard, not the rest of Har-Bayis. He tells you to look there over there in these halachas. Umashe hiftir gam kein b'shtitut kein the siman taf samachet. Okay, there was something else they hold. Let's read this part. V'mishnah b'rasham v'siv siman katan kufhei pasak gam kein b'shtitut kazot. The Mishnah Berurah says this also very clearly. entering the temple in a state of impurity is forbidden even today. This is the one that Yar Hoffman guy in the Five Towns who likes to misquote Rabbi Bar-Hayim says without apologizing, right? Or without doing his homework, and also said stuff about me, which is bypassing. He didn't mean it personally on me, but he attached it to, he attached a picture of it, that stuff, and also didn't give me a chance to properly respond. He's repeated this half truth. Yes, it is forbidden to enter the Azara in impurity, but not to enter the Temple Mount. He's very inexact. Well, the Mishnah Berurah says it. You're not to enter Mokol Mikdash. When the Mishnah Berurah said it, he meant the Azara, and when Yair Hoffman says it, he means the Temple Mount, which is not intellectually honest, or at least inexact. And if you're inexact, you'll lead to these things. Okay? V'osif b'sifro likutei halachot al zvachim perak hashochet v'amal la'avi shekain hu gam da'atan shel smag v'achinuch v'aritba v'atashbeitz v'atur. You know who else holds of this that can't enter the Azara in a state of impurity even today? A list. It's the Sefer Achinuch, the Ritva, the Tashbeitz, the Tur, Chinuch. Okay, fine. Everybody held of this. Like I said, this is sort of bait and switch. They all held you can't enter the Azara, but they didn't mean you can't enter the Temple Mount. With the Sefer Kaftor Ferach was written by Ishtoria Parki. He is a medieval traveler, also one of the Rishonim. And he was one of the first people to come back to Eretz Yisrael and write about the geography there, and things he discovered. I remember Rabbi Braunspiel says, I have a copy. He brought us a copy of the Kaftor of Ferach. He says it was written by someone with a very funny name. Ishtori is not a regular Hebrew name. It's like a Spanish name. It's Hebraicized. It's a very strange name. You read it, so there you have it. In the sixth parak, Kotev Nami b'Fashtut Shanichnas Haynu Hayom Shalom Tmeim B'Makom Abayis Chayav Koris. He said also that the standard understanding was one who nowadays, we're all contaminated, enters the area of the temple is liable to excision. Here's an important line of Tzitz Eliezer where he makes his point. Because like I said, until this point, the Tzitz Eliezer has only showed us no entering the courtyard of the temple, but not entering Har Bayis. He says, V'im kain ein lanu l'karev b'petach har bayit v'lifnim. And therefore, we shouldn't even get close enough to enter the Temple Mount. Big jump. Shouldn't even enter the Temple Mount. And beyond that, the entrance of the Temple Mount. Why not? Ki misham v'ala hu machaneh leviyah. Because from the entrance of the Temple Mount is machaneh leviyah. He just told us 2 days ago that machaneh leviyah, even a dead person could go into machaneh leviyah. I mean, he can't walk himself, but Moshe Rabbeinu carried a dead person into machaneh leviyah. And there were contaminated people who had carried that dead person within Machaneh Leviyah. So, what's going on here? It says, the Sefer Reim says this also, that's Rabbi Eliezer Mimitz, and he has an interesting opinion about when Ben Hashmashus is. Comes up on Shabbos, but it's not La Halacha. And he also says there are others who felt this. Kedushas Mikdash has not been nullified. I put this line in red for those who have the text over here, because here's where the Tzitz Eliezer makes the jump. The halacha always was no entering the temple courtyard, but here he extended it to all of Har Bayis. But there was no halachic reasoning there. Just everybody until this point didn't enter the Azara, and he didn't make note of the history. Jews, for a few centuries, if not millennia, were entering the Temple Mount to pray, even in this state. Like the Rambam, it's eminently clear. It was only because of this political decision that now Jews do not enter Har Bayis at all, that people look back at the Rambam's letter and said, the Rambam didn't even go to Har Bayis. We don't. It must be when the Rambam says they went to the Bayis Gadol V'Kadosh and daven there, he must have gone somewhere else. He went to the great synagogue of Jerusalem. In the old city, in the old city of Jerusalem in the Rambam's time, when there was basically no Jews there was a gigantic synagogue called Bayis Gadol V'Kadosh, and that's where he davened. And they discount the next line. The Rambam says, and just like I davened in its Kurban, I should daven there when it's rebuilt. So Rambam went to the ruins of a great synagogue in Jerusalem and is praying for the day. He made it a holiday that he got to a synagogue in Jerusalem and is praying it will be rebuilt. And he wasn't talking about the base of Mikdash at all. Okay, so you could do that. Or you could say, you know what? That which has been the...
Did they try to make a jump and say it was the Churva?
Well, the Churva hadn't been built yet. But some other... Yeah.
Take and make a jump.
Yeah. So, he says, there was the Rav Bechar, he says, a Gaon Sephardi, a Sephardic Gadol, of blessed memory, wrote the following, Zal. B'Sefro Divrei Emeth Binyan Tevel. He was writing the book book of true words regarding Tevel. What's Tevel? Tevel is untithed produce. So you can't eat it. They didn't take out the portion for the Kohen yet. Kotevel shitat Ramban bezeh diyeterhi shelo timot. Okay? Diyaterhi shelo tamut. Sorry. It's like a peg so that nothing should collapse. Okay? Use pegs to hold up the ropes that are holding up the tent. They're pulling tension on the tent from both sides, right? Yeah, Ted Naman. Whoa. Oh, I'm going to focus on this. Okay. Vinosaf al Sefer Truma Asmag, or Sefer Torah Shasmag. I'm getting confused by the Rashi Tevos here. Basically, the book that the Smag wrote. V'ha'aguda Meviu Muchiach, also the Sefer Aguda, brings and proves what? Shebechazot Gam Datan Shel Rashi, Haraz, and the Ran Ayin Sham. 3 Rishonim also held this way. They all going to the temple area in a state of impurity today. Once again, they didn't say it like the Tzitz Eliezer says, and you know what? Don't even go to Har Bayis. They didn't make that jump yet. It hasn't been done in history. So they say the Gemara in Shavuos. Shavuos, like to say, why don't we study Shavuos on Shavuos? Because it's talking about oaths, it's not talking about weeks. Different words in Hebrew. In Yiddish, they sound the same. They're spelled the same in Hebrew, but they're not the same word. One is Shavuot and one is Shavuot. The Shavuot. Okay. Boy, Rabbi Yirmiyah, Ben Bavel Shalal Yisrael. Rabbi Yirmiyah asked a question. You have a person from Bavel who ascended to land of Israel. He doesn't know where the temple is. Okay? So this happened. If you'd come from Bavel in the 300s, there was barely anything there. The walls of Jerusalem were gone. Barely any Jews in the Jerusalem area. And maybe you haven't found the Jews who are around the area. He could tell you. So the Ben Bavel just shows up. He knows to get to Jerusalem. He asked Goyim how to get to Jerusalem. And now he's, for the first time, in the area that used to be Jerusalem, a destroyed city. And it's unclear to him where to go. What do I do? I should maybe put it on like not automatic lock or something like that. Delay it. Okay, so what does he do? So you're going to understand what's the case. It's a little bit ambiguous, but either way, he doesn't know what to do. Mahu, so what should he do? It says in Tosfos there, V'nalam farshay bizman hazeh ma'iri ayin sham. They're talking about nowadays. Okay, it's talking about nowadays. Ben Bavel, who was stuck, it's talking about since Tosfos time. Nothing changed much from the year 150 until the time of Tosfos. The retaining walls of the Temple Mount are there. But the retaining walls of the Temple Mount enclose an area that's much bigger than the Halachic Temple Mount, by the way. Halachic Temple Mount is an area of 500 by 500 amos. Okay? Herod extended it. Oh boy. Okay? So what are they getting at? Ufasku Kain Halacha Bazeh, Gam B'Sefer Shari Tzedek, Shari Mishpat, and the rest of them, that basically they're telling the person who comes from Bavel has to watch out not to go into the Machon Mikdash in a state of impurity. So Tzitz Eliezer is saying that whatever prohibition existed then, since Talmudic times, continues to exist today. Nothing has changed. Correct. But the Tzitz Eliezer is trying to tell you, no, it should be even more strict today than it was then. He's bringing this point, that's why I put it in blue. This point proves what we've been saying all along. The Maimonidean rule, don't go into the Hazara, is ancient. It's from Chazal's times. People have known this for a long time. And therefore don't go at all onto the Temple Mount is already a jump. He says in Beis Yisrael Sham Ayin Sham, you can find other writings about this. He wrote Pashtus, and according to the shoot of Ma'ari, Levi, and others. Also, this is the same truth today. Okay, but there Rashba, Mars, okay, fine. More sources. Also, they proved, according to the Ravid, the one who said that maybe the temple sanctity doesn't exist today, it stopped existing. Maybe it's still forbidden to go into the Temple Mount precinct. Just because the Ravid says it's not sanctified doesn't mean there's not some other reason not to go walking around the Azara or within the Dome of the Rock. It's still forbidden. Rakas or Karis Leka. You're not going to get hit with the prohibition of excision, but maybe you'll still get whipped. Maybe the sages will punish you some other way. Maybe there'll be a divine punishment. We hold that there's a lot of Averas. Based in doesn't intervene necessarily. We say, for example, Kanai Pogimbo, that's rare. Or we say Nisa B'Nei Shemayim, right? Or Arimi. There's all sorts of punishments that God has. He can bring about all sorts of things. It's still forbidden. Okay? But still Isser Torah. Al Kopanim Isser B'D'Rabbanan, as you can find there. Or it should be an Isser D'Rabbanan. Okay? He now quotes the Ma'asai Melech of the Rambam. Rambam says, the temple maintained its original sanctity when the Jews went into exile the second time. Then since the temple was first built the first time around, its sanctity has persisted through all the destructions and all the exiles. Okay? Sorry, I read this wrong over here. It says that when Ezra came, right, Eretz Yisrael got back its Kedusha. Eretz Yisrael, the Rambam says, lost its Kedusha with the Babylonian conquest and regained it when, not necessarily Ezra, but around that time. Okay? Rambam attributes it to Ezra. Yisrael says, in the future is ingathered. What will happen? Miyad tachzor l'kedushasa b'li kiddush. The land of Israel will. The Rambam says they don't need the land of Israel to be re-sanctified. What Ezra did sanctified it eternally. Yes, it did lose its sanctity, but it never lost it again. By the way, this opinion that says it land lost its sanctity, that means that nowadays, at least in by 1948, it regained its sanctity. No, it's good to know. Yeah, there doesn't say it. Tekav kisholchu apritzim. What happened? Chazar tekav kedushat abayit limkomo. There are those who say that with regards to the temple also, once the temple was retaken, the desecration that had been done by the invaders was taken away, the re-sanctification. Wait a minute, so all you had to do was reconquer the Temple Mount in 67, and that's it. Now the re-sanctification has taken place. Okay, fine, whatever it may be. The Tzitz Eliezer continues, what? When we give it back? No. Yeah, so what do you do? What do you do if the Jews just give up on the land of Israel? Okay? I don't know. I just hope it's recording properly. Before it said I was recording properly, but now it might be sideways. Okay. This is interesting. I put this in green because this is not necessarily his argument. These are things that, we have to ask more questions about. I'll read it to you. We're jumping into the Tzitz Eliezer. It says, "Besaprim odzod zeknei Yerushalayim al mikra shekara b'shnei shvarim shebarchu mibeit Bar-Hayim." There's a legend. Okay, 2 oxen escaped the slaughterhouse, right in Jerusalem. Ve'alu ela mesilah sheb'tzoa dromit mizrachit shemachrei chumad arbait, and they started going up the path that's at the southeastern corner behind Arbais. Southeastern corner. Okay, that's not where that's like the opposite. When you come in from the buses to the Kotel Plaza, you're at the southwest corner. The southeast corner would be the side of Jerusalem, to the outside of the old city, near where you see like the Yad Shalom and place like that. It's the side. It's the side facing. What? That's where like a gate would actually go into. Well, also it's the side facing the mount of the mount of Har Menuchos. Sorry, not Har Menuchos. The Mount of Olives. There's Mount Scopus is the north side of that mountain. The south side is Mount of Olives. And now Mount of Olives looks like Har Menuchos because it's just a gigantic cemetery. There used to not be a cemetery on Har Hazaysin. The old Yeshuv people converted it into a cemetery. Okay? Now it basically takes up the whole mountainside, Why did Jews want to turn this area right near the temple into a big tumas maze? Because they, the belief in the resurrection. They want to get front row seats when they get resurrected. Let's see here. So the two escaped, and they got really close to Temple. I couldn't find exactly where it was. The Asar Rav Shmuel Salant Zal Afilu Shluach HaShomer Nochri L'Tov Sam Shamul Haviyam. Rav Shmuel Salant was very machmir. He didn't want them to send the Gentile guard to go get the 2 oxen off the Temple Mount. Okay? Shouldn't go there. V'yitir rak zot lakim alav tzakot. Okay? They only had people go there and scream at the oxen. Madua shalosh shamar etev al shvarim shalo yivrechu kadei shavina yedezem yatzbo mashalav lasot. Instead, they told the guy in charge of the oxen What are you doing? Why? You should have watched out. Okay? It was his fault. So now, this is an interesting argument he makes. Let's say someone's going to, he calls, the Tzitz Eliezer calls this lihidachek. He's going to be stubborn about it. He's just going to push for this type of thing. He wants to go into the Har Bayis with the excuse, a maslah's excuse, or some sort of other teretz. Shel shvichas siach tefila lifnei yotzer kol. He's claiming, I want to go to the temple to pour out my heart to God, to the Creator. Because the holy place. Let's say someone says, the Tzitz Eliezer heard people say, Tzitz Eliezer, we really want to go daven in the holy place. So the Tzitz Eliezer was telling them, well, I don't want to, what do you think you are? Okay, that's a pious claim. Kvar pasak lumato et tisko the sefer mishpat kohen. Rav Kook already taskined you shouldn't do that. Okay, look at what Rav Kook said. Okay, shein harevach ze klum. Okay, what are you gaining from this? You're not gaining anything. You think you go daven to the Har Bayis, it's some sort of advantage. It's better than davening elsewhere. No, it isn't. The Gabe Hefsid shel gasut halev me'okom ha'kudush hazeh. You're losing out because you think you're arrogant enough to go there to daven. Okay, you think you're being pious by wanting to pray there, but really maybe you shouldn't be so like that. Now the problem is that others would argue, Rav Lior and Rav Ariel argued, but it says in the books of the prophets, there are many Tehillim about this. King David's only wish was to go to pray in God's house. Like I said before, when the temple was standing, Jews were in Har Bayis all the time davening. There was no limit to how much a Jew could go to Har Bayis and daven as long as he was ritually pure. Just like people hang out at the hotel and daven all the time now. Further, that's what the prophets promised. One day, the temple will be a base tefillah for everybody. Even goyim want to go there and daven. That's the most natural human expression of religious expression. Okay, so these people are disconnected. It was like that callous rabbi, Callous, who's very callous towards this. Says, well, you don't want to go daven. Go daven at Kotel. That's like the highest thing you could do in Judaism. That's according to your folk Judaism. People have become so disconnected from the temple, they forgot that the highest level a person could achieve that King David wrote songs about was going to the temple to daven. So yeah, like what would he tell someone who wants to bring a korban? A person who wanted to bring a nedava, right? You tell him, oh, you're so pious, but you might be impure. Why should you go to the temple? You didn't have to go. You obligated yourself to go to the temple. Why don't you just stay away? So this argument, unfortunately, shows a disconnect. Let's go on. He says, Lamadnu midvarav eleh shel Tiferes Yaakov raya l'mashe helenu. From words of Tiferes Yaakov, we learned something that we had mentioned before. Shelo nuchal adat ka'et mikama bechinot gidrei hamekomot b'diuk. He said, where did Tiferes Yaakov write this? He wasn't on the Temple Mount, saying, right now we are limited in our ability to actually delineate where we're allowed to go. Uncertainty. Therefore, no going on Har Bayis at all. So this also is a stick your head in the sand argument. There are many great scholars who have all the information now, especially they could go there, and they have photographs, they have all sorts of amazing ways to actually tell, no, we can know beyond a shadow of a doubt where you're allowed to go. It's one thing if rabbis who had never been to Eretz Yisrael or had never been on Har Bayis and don't have access to all the information we have now to just say, oh, we don't know. Should I give you your phone so you can check your messages? Okay? They don't know. So to say this, once again, is throwing a Bari V'Shema. Because I'll have this rule, Bari V'Shema, Bari Adif. If someone comes to you and says, I'm pretty certain of something, I've studied this matter, I've looked into it, here's all my information, and someone, without knowing how to refute it, just says, I doubt what you say. I'm just going to cast doubt on this. I'm not going to disprove what you say, so we don't listen to that. That's the Shema. Maybe it's not. No, this person is Bari. Okay, fine. Because I'll say, if you have in court, one guy comes in, I am certain this is mine. The other guy says, I don't know. So, you lose. Bari V'Shema, Bari Adif. And, this is contradicted. There are many, like I said, especially nowadays, they put themselves to the work. Rav Gorin has a book wherein he delineates all the different opinions of exactly how it should be in the temple now. Basically, you set the temple edifice, Kodesh HaKodashim, over where the rock is in the dome of the rock, and then you assume, let's say the measurements like Chazon Ish. Chazon Ish has like a 56 centimeter amma. Rav Chaim Naz says it's 48 centimeters. Those calculating the Rambam say it's 45 centimeters. That's a difference of 13 centimeters. You know how bit much 13 centimeters is for amma? It's not a lot. This is centimeters, by the way. We're not talking about inches. Okay, not even half a foot. By the way, Har HaBayis itself is 500 by 500 amos. The minimal size of Har HaBayis, if let's say overlaying this, is about 250 meters by 250 meters, a little bit less. According to the Chazon Ish, it's just a little bit bigger. Okay, its a percentage is about, what is it, 56 over 48. That's what it's about. It's less than 20% bigger. Okay, to scale. So you're not going to get. You showed there's so much of Har HaBayis that's not halachically even Har HaBayis. Kal v'chomer, places that are with not even the holy or the Azara. So you can stay very far away from it. It's not really an issue right now. But if you want, you can see someone who did the research. Also, one of the advantages they have is everything that was said until this point, and until 67, involved bird's eye view, looking at the area from overhead. It didn't take into account, I said this wrong last week, I kept saying topology. The word is topography. Okay, get the two words confused. The word is topography. The topography of the Temple Mount hasn't changed, and that is the height addition also. The general topography of the mount is that there's that central platform that's raised above the others. You can immediately discount any of the shitas that have the area that's supposed to be as high as, let's say, the Azara, that is not on the central platform. Or vice versa, areas that are not supposed to be as high as the Azara, that end up on the central platform according to the shitas, they get immediately discounted. The height of the rock in the dome of the rock, relative to the height of the Temple Mount floor, fits what is described and is supposed to be according to what we have in our traditions. And you could count down from there. If you know, like, here's the total height that the Rambam says of the Even HaShasiyah, and the Rambam says how many half Amma steps you went up to get there, so you can now count backwards. Use whichever Amma. Use the Chazon Ish Amma. You know what will happen? You'll end up below the surface of the Temple Mount. So we know that it's pretty much not. The Chazon Ish's mitos, most people who look into this always knew that there's some sort of exaggeration going on. It's too much of a chumrah, it takes too many assumptions. Those who actually did the measurements always come to, like I said, Rav Chaim Naz conclusion. They like his sheet, his measurements of everything, volume, weight, and distance, because it matches up, it fits. And by the way, we dig up things nowadays that are supposed to be ammas and things like that, and they can actually tell, oh look, an amma is basically the cubit of a man. A cubit is from here to there, and you go, for example, to the place in Shilo, the area where the Azar used to sit. From this finger, the middle finger to the end of the elbow. Okay, so they know how the average height of a person was. This is how you could find. You could see in Shiloh there's an area that's 50 by 100 amas, because that was the original Azara, and it's basically like this. It's not like the Chazon Ish. As a matter of fact, I don't know of an example. Maybe someone who knows did the research on this. They haven't dug up one Jewish source indicating like the Chazon Ish's amma. It's mostly like the people were more makel. One of the things they dug up is, for example, we don't have to hold everything like the Rambam. The Rambam in the schematic of the menorah, what do we see? How did the Rambam show the menorah? Straight branches, right? Why do people say the menorah had curved branches then? The Rambam drew that it should have straight branches. Maybe lav davka, fine. Why do we assume the menorah had rounded branches? Well, Rashi says the branches had been rounded.
No, I think so.
More than that. Okay, Tosfos apparently also. Everything from the time of the temples or immediately after the time of the temple that depicts in an artistic manner the menorah as it was in the temple, whether it's coins minted by Jews or paintings or engravings made by Jews or by their enemies who were celebrating defeating the Jews, show the menorah with what? Rounded branches. But you think the Romans drew their conquest of Jerusalem. They drew the Shulchan. They drew this. They drew those things. So the Romans drew the menorah. They weren't trying to take sides in a machluk as Rashi and Rambam. They depicted the menorah that they pillaged from the temple. But Jews also depicted the menorah on Jewish synagogues from Second Temple times and post-Second Temple times, and on Jewish coins from those times. How did the Jews depict their menorah in the temple? with rounded arms.
Maybe because it was too complicated for them to draw straight. You never know.
Okay, fine. Never know. Everything until the Rambam that they've dug up indicates that the menorah had rounded branches.
By paintings?
Made by Jews who were familiar with this. The menorah was seen by many Jews. How many Jews saw the menorah? Anybody who came on Ali Ala Regel got to see a menorah. Why? Because part of the service on the holidays was the Kohanim would pick up the menorah and bring it out to the Azara and show it to everybody. Right? Yes, that's part of the service. It's depicted in the books. Mishnah talks about this. And at a certain point in the service on the holidays, what would they do also? People even knew what the kruvim looked like. Did they ever take the kruvim out of the Holy of Holies? No, but what did they do? They opened up the paroches and showed everybody. Here's the kruvim. They're be'urim zeh b'zeh. People knew what the kruvim looked like. Am Yisrael saw these things. My point is, there are things that people saw, and we have evidence thereof. And we don't have evidence of ridiculously large amos. By the way, we do see things that there's some amas that are tefach longer than the others, like the short tefach in the temple. Okay, the Ramban talks about that. The Mizbeach was built with regular amas and short amas. Instead of 6 tefachim, 5 tefachim. But we have evidence of shorter amas. Okay? Now, I brought this idea also. It could very well be you have Rishonim Achronim who describe, I don't know what it looks like, a distance, a physical reality, measure something. I don't know what it is. Or they say there's some uncertainty in the matter. Or I think this is what it is. The Ramban writes about Rashi describing where Rachel Imenu died. Where did Rachel Imenu die? It says, Ve'od kivrata aretz lavo efrata. Kivrata aretz. So read what Ramban says about this. What advantage did the Ramban have over Rashi? Well, he lived 2 centuries later, and he made it to Eretz Yisrael. Did Rashi ever come to Eretz Yisrael? No. Did Rashi draw maps or try to describe what a map of Eretz Yisrael looks like? Yes. Did Rashi, when Rashi describes her, like we have notes that based on Rashi's interpretation, do those fit what we know of Eretz Yisrael? Not so much. So the Ramban says, Menachem Peirash Lishon Kabir Malach Rav. Kivrat Aretz is a long distance. Menachem ibn Saruk, who preceded Rashi. Rashi relies on Menachem and Dunash, early grammarians, right? Va'agada in Gracious Rabbah says, Bizman Sha'aretz Chalula Kichvara Shehanir Matsui. It's when the earth is hollowed out like a sieve. It's a time when they're plowing. Vastavavar. And the stav, that means the rainy season, doesn't mean fall like it does in modern Hebrew. It's another word for koref. The rainy season has passed. V'adayin asharav luba. And the heat has yet to come. Okay? It's season now, time for plowing and planting. Ve'ein zeh pshuto shel mikra. The Ramban says that's not pshat of kivrata aretz. Sharei b'Naaman matzinu, with regards to Naaman, the Aramean general, who was a leper and sent to Elisha the Navi to be cured. What does it say? Vayelech mito kivrat aretz. He went with him about a distance of kivrat aretz, the same distance here. How far was that? V'omer ani shehu midat karka. Okay, Lashon Rashi. So Rashi says, I think it's a distance, an actual measurement. Okay, certain distance. V'anachon masha chashav bo Rav David Kimchi. Ramban says, I like what the Radak says. The kaf is what? The dimyon ve'enena sharshit. Kivrat. Some say kvara. And Rashi, likes this, the kaf is part of the shorish. Kivrat. He says, no, the kaf there is a prefix. The word is brat. Okay? Like a brat. Which means, umotzaha milah, hayu levarot lamo. Okay? Barot. Okay? It's like desolations. La tavreni lachem, where you serve me food. Okay, what's going on here? Inyan achila muetet baboker. Okay, lahavrot means to give someone food, right? So it means a little bit of food that a person eats in the morning, some bread. Ufirusha shir malach eretz min haboker ad le'it ha'ochel. Kivrat aretz means enough time. Ki birat aretz, which is enough time from when you wake up until you eat breakfast. Kikein yisharu kol chedarech. Because that's what people walk. They get out a little bit at the beginning of the day and then they stop for breakfast. What is the Ramban saying here in nice terms? Chevelle points this out. Okay? Now here's the kicker, what the Ramban's getting at. I originally wrote this. Zeh katafti tchila. I wrote this originally when Ramban was in Portugal. Right? He got into arguments and stuff, and after he beat Pablo Cristiani in the disputations, he had to flee. Right? He made Christianity look bad because he defended Judaism. Now that I had the privilege of getting to Jerusalem, the Ramban, Shevach la'ela tov amitiv. Praise be to the Lord, or to God, who is good and does good. Ra'iti be'enai she'ein min kvurat Rachel levet lechem afilu mil. Did you know between Kever Rachel and the city of Bethlehem is not even a mile? Talking about the 18-minute meal, okay, which is about a kilometer in his terms. You can walk it easily. It's not what I thought originally. It's not like Malach Rav. It's not like Rashi says. V'inei huchchash ha-perush hazeh. So this perush has been knocked away. Okay, perush is denied. I actually saw it. The Gam Divrei Menachem, and what Menachem ibn Saruk wrote also doesn't hold up. Why? Because Rashi and everybody else and the Radak, what didn't they see? The reality. Okay, Aval hu shem midat aretz kedivrei Rashi. It fits with Rashi. Okay, midat aretz. It's about this much. It's not what they said, something subjective or objective. Okay, fits with what Rashi's saying. So the Ramban dismissed, or as they even to decide between Rishonim who are giving a pshat in what is said in the Torah, they all said what the distance is. But he says, I actually went there. I saw it. So you cannot say, concerning halachic opinions about where things are on the Temple Mount, there's uncertainty. I studied the Midos, I studied what the Rambam wrote, but you never were there. You didn't go take a tape measure. Nowadays, you know how they measure distances? They don't use the things that the old surveyors use. They just use a laser thing. They put the stake in the ground, press the camera laser thing that they have. It tells you what the distance is, right? You ever see how surveyors used to measure distance by triangulating? What do surveyors do? They have, like Huey, Dewey, and Louie did this. They have a distance apart from each other, a known distance. This guy stands with the post here. This guy stands with the post there, and the guy over there is standing along the second side of the triangle and measures the angle. And once he knows this side and this angle, okay, using basic Pythagoras or using the cosines and all that, you can figure out what the hypotenuse is, that distance. Okay, there are other ways to measure. Rabbi Gamliel apparently was doing things like this also, long distance measuring. But nowadays, they don't even need two guys standing here with the camera like measuring the angle. Instead, they just use a laser pointer thing. They put this flag over here, that one over there, boom. Okay, they know the perfect air distance between the 2 points. Okay, using the laser. How does the laser do it? The laser knows the distance. Okay, fine. So my point here was you can't have uncertainty with this regard, and because now it's getting late, we'll save this last piece of Tzitz Eliezer for beyond this. I was actually we have to look in the Makbili and the Korean also for something surprising. So I'll leave the surprise for the end. Let's finish the Tzitz Eliezer. ועוד זאת חשבתי בדעתי דייתכן וקרוב ודאי דהזהירות שנזהרים בזה הוא גם בגלל זה מה שנמצא כתוב בספר פת השולחן. Okay? The Tzitz Eliezer thinks perhaps this blanket prohibition of going onto the Temple Mount is because of something I found in the Pas HaShulchan. What does it say? V'midei dabro sham al adot hachoma mizrachit shel Har Bayit, concerning this eastern wall of Har Bayit, still standing today, kotei b'lshon zeh. He writes the following: Tzarich lishkol hadavar, we must consider ki ulai chidshu zo hachoma kimo sheomrim shekatuv uvda denivda ayidei takifim me'anshe Spania Sfarad. Okay, Spania. Maybe this wall was actually renewed. This isn't the original wall, Herodian retaining wall. This is something that a bunch of Spaniards built sometime later in history. This is not original Temple Mount wall from Temple times. Shematzu chen b'nei HaMelech, they found favor in the eyes of the king. The king gave them permission to do this. V'kitru v'asu hachoma b'makom chadash, they made it. They shortened it and they put the wall in a new place. Somehow they shifted the wall. They built it beyond the wall, or they knocked down the original wall and they moved it in. Something's been done differently. The mashma'ut shechomat Har Bayit haya b'sof shipuo. Okay, it seems that the wall of Har Bayit was once it gets to the bottom part. Har Bayit is like a mountain, so the wall is at the bottom side. It's not a retaining wall. and been filled in, so that you can actually go down Har Bayis and then you'll get to a wall. Okay. As it says in Midos. Okay, maybe that's not shot, by the way. It seems that, like people say, the Herodian walls were built around Har Bayis, and then there was a fill-in. That's what the case nowadays. You go see how they did it. It's an old technique. Okay, it says here, if you hold like the Pas Shulchan, who says that maybe these Spaniards were telling the truth, which already is, I don't know. Okay. You have to really consider, there might be a consideration here, like a worry. And he says, Shakulu, and actually this has been pretty much considered, that what we know as the eastern wall of the Temple Mount is new. It's not the original. Okay? It was done against the will of the sages, according to Jewish strong men. Now they're causing people to go into Har Bayis. If they've moved the wall in this way, right, it means that outside the wall is Har Bayis.
Yeah, there's no way to the platform.
Okay, yes, correct. As a matter of fact, the eastern wall is the most exact one. The eastern wall is the most exact one, the easiest one to actually tell that it fits what's described there. Okay? Hold on 1 second. Really, the original wall was beyond that. Okay? Oy Gewalt. Yeah. Hold on, he continues. You also have to worry about the southern side, because the southern side of Temple Mount is not sloped at all. It's been leveled off. Maybe that wall is not the correct wall. Shegam came shipuahu, Lomar Gamkein Shechomer Arbayit Amitit Haita Magad Gamkein Ad Sofa Shipua Shichomat Ha'ir Shelfaninu. The southern side of the Temple Mount, maybe that's not the original wall. Maybe the Temple Mount wall was actually to the south. By the way, Jews walk there all the time. You've seen that area? It's an archaeological site. But the problem is, everybody knows that the southern mount of the Temple wall, the southern side of the Temple Mount wall, is actually quite ancient. It is Herodian, beyond the doubt. Okay, he filled it in there. There's no way he could have done it otherwise. Okay, and the old city wall itself was even more to the south. Okay, perhaps in Ir David area now. Maybe that wall of the Temple Mount was the outer city wall. By the way, what's the Tzitz Eliezer doing here? Yes, based on bad sources. It's pretty certain nowadays that no, the box around the Temple Mount is the Herodian box. It's Herodian stone. There's a lot of evidence indicating that. No one moved the walls. And not only that, recently, what happened since 1967, they're actually digging up the old city walls now. Makbili even has a map over here indicating where aside from the maps of the wall of the Temple Mount, he even shows you where the old city walls were back in the day. And why is it good for Makbili to write this? Here's what you actually have. Whereas the Tzitz Eliezer is telling you maybe the Temple Mount is actually more to that side or more to the south. Okay, it's actually not. It's actually there. And over here is original old city, at least an old city in, let's say, Ezra's time and in Agrippas's time. Nafkamina, if you actually get a sacrifice done, you actually achieve Korban Pesach, it must be even within this box, because they uncovered the indication of the old city wall. You know what else they found? You could go in Ir David. What other stuff have they found? The springs, Hezekiah's water tunnel, the place where King David's house used to be. These are all things that are still there. And by the way, because Jews used to live there, this is our ancestral homeland, the more we dig and the more we look, what are we going to find? More indications. The prophet Yirmiyahu was told the people who are doing the sale of land, Hinei Chamamel, then Shalom Dodatecha is coming to sell you a field, right? So people are supposed to say, what do you mean? Yirmiyahu, you're telling us we're about to go into Galus, we're going to lose this whole land. Why are you now doing a sale and getting witnesses and writing up a proper contract between Kohanim? Who's buying the field? What's going on with that? God's promising him you'll get this land back. So what do you do with the Sefer HaMiknah, which means the contract? What do you do with it? Told them, put it into the earthenware, bury it well, hide it, turn it into a piece of archaeology. L'ma'an ya'amod yamim rabim. Okay? Here's the funny thing. I needed a document to prove a case in court. I had it. It was about 4 years old, but I had the document. Okay? I presented the document to the court. Okay? I found it in the closet. It was printed by Bezek. It had to do with the phone bill. Simple document. If I wanted to find my grandfather's phone bill, my father has all sorts of documents in his file cabinets. I would dig it out. Some stuff is kind of old, but I'd find it. If I'd find his great-grandfather's document, that's also legitimate. Does the age of the document matter? If it's signed and sealed and it indicates what it indicates, does that matter? If it's 2,000 years old or 200 years old? For those people who don't believe in archaeology, Rav Shefker said, we believe in archaeology evidence. Okay? There's the Gemara assumes that. You found their tzitzis. Doesn't matter how old it is, it indicates something. You find treasures in the walls of your house in a certain way that obviously weren't there before the Israelites came. So you say God left it that you'd find Amorite treasures. The age indicates where you find it, indicates what it is. But you don't have to worry that some other Jew's property. It's from the Goyim that you were meant to, by the way, take away their houses and their property and inherit it for yourself. So Yirmiyahu is saying, by God, if you have a document, you put it away, and it's dug up later, it still proves what it proves. Just because it's really old, and it came out of the ground and it had to be dusted off, it doesn't mean it doesn't prove anything. Adarabah. When Jews print coins, you know that we have old pictures of lulavim and esrogim. Who put lulavim and esrogim on their coins? Jews. Ancient Second Temple Jews. It looks like a lulav and an esrog. It shows the palm frond, and it shows an esrog. It even has a gartel on the esrog. Yeah. Some esrogim have a natural gartel to them, caused by a virus, by the way. You know what I'm talking about? The gartel of an esrog. Some esrogs are indented around the middle, right? So esrogim look like that also. We know what an esrog is since temple times. Okay, so Jews indicate these things. We have evidence. Inyana devar sheka'et b'chafirot shosim misaviv haray harai. I don't know why you're there. In the diggings that they're doing around these areas, motzim bemet shirei chomot me'achorei chomot eleh hamizrachi v'adromi. They're starting to uncover walls that are to the east and to the south of these walls. Who can know if we're talking about the inner walls of the Temple Mount or outer walls of the city when they dig up these walls? Makbili has the answer. A wall that goes on for a kilometer like this, a wall that's really big and goes way away from where the Temple Mount is, so it's going to Mount Zion and God knows where, that's the wall of the city. And the more limited wall, which exactly fits where Herod put it, is perfectly rectangular, that's the wall of the Temple Mount, as it always was, and as per our tradition. The Pat Shulchan was worried perhaps the Temple Mount walls are not the ones that we see. Maybe they're to the east or to the west, to the south, because now they're finding walls. The answer is yes, we're finding walls of the city itself, because they're much bigger than described. And the walls that we see are, like the Rabbah says, they surround what we've always known to be the Temple Mount. If you would say that, let's say the Rabbah is correct, the tradition is correct, this is the Dome of the Rock, it's over here, and the southern wall of the Temple Mount is this new wall they're finding over here, how far away is this one? It's way too far. Okay? Har HaBayis is supposed to be 500 amos by 500 amos around the Makom HaMikdash.
So with this logic, if you can say that it's over here or over there,
yeah.
You can't be anywhere.
You can't be anywhere in Jerusalem. Yes, if the walls have meandered so far, the Tzitz should tell people, wait a minute, now I should be going on Har HaBayis. Now this is not a proof that there's Har HaBayis. Har HaBayis could very well be well to the south, or to the east, or even to the west, not to the north. They're not talking about to the north. Of what? Why do I say to the west? Because this wall that's found to the south then continues to the west. So any of these areas could be Har HaBayis. The entire old city, well, at least the Armenian quarter and the Jewish quarter and the areas around Kever David, outside of Har Zion, those are also potentially Har HaBayis.
They find the walls of not Har HaBayis, of the old city in Shifte Israel, Me'asharim.
Not old city. They found other things, but not the old city.
Not
The old city was never. No, it was never that big. No, they find other things, by the way. There's all sorts of stuff, but the old city, the Jerusalem old city, its northern border was basically where even what's called the Christian quarter nowadays was not old Jerusalem. How do you know? because the Christians found a Jewish burial cave outside the city and declared it to be Oso Aisha's grave, and they incorporated that into the old city. The current old city has been extended northward. The Jews would never have put a burial cave in Jerusalem. It's already outside. So, Kal V'chomer to get that far out, so like Mea Sharm area, Jerusalem's old city in temple times never went that far. Okay, so we'll pray for restoration of the temple. God willing, next week we'll talk about the Korain and the Makbili, appendices, and the surprise ending. Okay, be good.